You ever notice how the most dangerous betrayals are the ones that happen right in front of you, so slowly and naturally that you mistake them for love? Let me tell you about Daniel and his brother Nathan, and how betrayal doesn't always arrive with dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it's been living in your house for decades, sleeping in the room next door, eating at your table while systematically dismantling everything you've built. Daniel was the older brother by 3 years, the responsible one who'd taken over their father's construction business after the old man's heart gave out. He'd been 28 then, married to Linda with a baby on the way, and he'd stepped into the role without complaint. Nathan was still in college, studying business, talking about going into finance. Daniel told him to finish school, to build his own life, that the family business would be fine. Nathan did finish school, but he came back to their hometown afterward. Said he wanted to be close to family, wanted to help Daniel with the business. Daniel was grateful. Running a construction company was brutal work, and having someone he trusted to handle the financial side seemed like a gift. They became partners officially, split the profits 60-40 since Daniel owned the company, and for 15 years, it seemed to work perfectly. The business grew under their joint management. Daniel handled the construction side, meeting with clients, overseeing projects, managing crews. Nathan ran the office, handled billing, payroll, contracts, banking. It was a natural division of labor, and Daniel trusted his brother completely. Why wouldn't he? They were family. They'd grown up sharing everything. Nathan had been best man at Daniel's wedding, godfather to Daniel's oldest son. Linda noticed things first, the way wives sometimes do, small things that didn't quite add up. Why were they having cash flow problems when Daniel's projects were consistently coming in under budget and ahead of schedule? Why did Nathan seem to always need to delay Daniel's salary just a little bit, while Nathan himself bought a new car, took expensive vacations, moved into a house that seemed beyond what his 40% should have afforded? When Linda mentioned these concerns to Daniel, he got defensive. Nathan was his brother. Nathan wouldn't steal from him. The cash flow issues were just normal business fluctuations. Nathan had probably gotten a good deal on the car. Maybe Linda was misremembering the vacation costs. Daniel had spent years building trust with his brother, and he wasn't about to destroy it based on his wife's suspicions. But Linda kept noticing. She saw how Nathan discouraged Daniel from looking at the books too closely, how he'd explain away discrepancies with complex financial jargon that made Daniel's eyes glaze over. She noticed that whenever Daniel wanted to make a major business decision, Nathan would find reasons to delay, to complicate, to redirect. She watched Nathan position himself as indispensable while simultaneously ensuring Daniel remained financially dependent on the business. It took Daniel's oldest son, Marcus, to finally expose what had been happening. Marcus had just graduated with an accounting degree and wanted to work in the family business. Nathan had been surprisingly resistant to the idea, but Daniel insisted. He wanted his son to learn the business, to eventually take over. Nathan couldn't refuse without appearing unreasonable. Marcus spent his first 3 months just observing, learning the systems Nathan had established. And what he found made him physically ill. His uncle had been systematically stealing from the company for over a decade. He'd created false vendor accounts that paid him directly. He'd been billing clients for amounts higher than what Daniel quoted, pocketing the difference. He'd been taking advances on projects and reporting them as expenses. The theft was elaborate, careful, and had been going on so long that it had become woven into the basic operations of the business. When Marcus brought his findings to Daniel, the older man's first reaction was denial. Then anger at Marcus for making such serious accusations, at Linda for putting ideas in Marcus's head, at everyone except Nathan. It took Marcus showing him page after page of documentation, walking him through the false accounts and fraudulent billing, before Daniel could begin to accept what his brother had done. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday evening in the office after everyone else had gone home. Daniel had asked Nathan to stay late, said they needed to discuss something. Nathan came into Daniel's office relaxed, unsuspecting, and found Daniel sitting at the desk with Marcus standing beside him, 15 years of financial records spread out between them. Daniel didn't yell. That might have been easier. He simply asked Nathan to explain the accounts, the billing discrepancies, the payments to vendors that didn't exist. Nathan tried to bluff first, to explain it away as accounting errors. But when Daniel showed him the evidence that Marcus had compiled, Nathan's face changed. The mask of brotherly affection slipped away, revealing something cold underneath. "You never would have kept the business running without me," Nathan said finally, not apologizing, not denying. "I made this company profitable. I handled all the hard parts while you got to play contractor and be the beloved boss." "I deserve more than 40%. His justification was complete, and apparently sincerely felt. He'd convinced himself that theft was simply taking what he was owed. Daniel felt something break inside him that had nothing to do with money. Nathan had been his brother, his partner, his children's godfather. They'd shared holidays and family dinners. Nathan had held Daniel's newborn children, had been there when their mother died, had stood beside Daniel at their father's funeral. And all the while, he'd been stealing, lying, betraying the trust that Daniel had given him completely. The amount Nathan had stolen over 15 years was staggering, close to $800,000 when Marcus finished calculating it all. Money that should have gone toward Daniel's retirement, his children's college funds, reinvestment in the company, money that Nathan had spent on his comfortable life while Daniel worked 70-hour weeks and worried about making payroll. The legal process was brutal. Daniel had to file charges, had to testify against his brother, had to watch Nathan sit in court and show no remorse. Nathan's defense was that he'd earned the money, that Daniel had always been their father's favorite, that the original split wasn't fair. He turned betrayal into victimhood, made himself the wronged party in a story where he'd been systematically stealing for years. The family fractured completely. Their mother, elderly and confused, didn't understand why her sons were fighting. She kept trying to mediate, to get them to reconcile, not comprehending that reconciliation wasn't possible. Nathan's wife filed for divorce, claiming she hadn't known about the theft, though Linda suspected she'd known and simply hadn't cared as long as the money kept coming. Daniel's children struggled with losing their uncle, the man they'd trusted and loved. His daughter Emma, Nathan's goddaughter, felt particularly betrayed. She'd gone to Nathan for advice about college, about relationships, about life. She'd believed he cared about her. Learning that he'd been stealing from her father the entire time made her question everything she'd thought was real about her family. The business survived, barely. Daniel had to take out loans to cover the money Nathan had stolen, had to restructure everything, had to rebuild trust with clients who were disturbed by the scandal. Marcus took over Nathan's role, but the dynamic was different now. Daniel checked everything, questioned everything, couldn't fully trust even his own son because trust itself had been revealed as dangerous. Nathan went to prison for 3 years after pleading guilty to multiple counts of embezzlement and fraud. It wasn't nearly enough for what he'd taken, but the prosecutor said it was the best they could do given the complexities of family business arrangements. Daniel attended the sentencing and felt nothing when Nathan was led away in handcuffs. The brother he'd loved had never really existed, just a performance maintained while the theft continued. What haunted Daniel most was looking back and seeing all the moments he'd missed, the times Nathan had discouraged him from examining the books. The deflections and explanations that seemed reasonable at the time but were actually sophisticated manipulation. The way Nathan had isolated Daniel from the financial details while positioning himself as essential. It had all been there, visible if Daniel had been willing to see it. Linda tried to tell him that he couldn't have known, that Nathan had been exceptionally skilled at deception, that family trust was supposed to be unconditional. But Daniel felt the weight of his own willful blindness. He'd chosen not to see, because seeing would have required action that would hurt. He'd protected his relationship with Nathan at the expense of his own family's financial security. Therapy helped, eventually. Daniel worked with a counselor who specialized in family trauma and betrayal. He learned that Nathan's theft had probably started small, justified in Nathan's mind as borrowing, and then escalated over years as he got away with it. The therapist explained that people can genuinely love someone while simultaneously betraying them, can compartmentalize in ways that let them maintain the performance of relationship while committing ongoing harm. Daniel's marriage to Linda actually strengthened through the crisis. She'd been right about Nathan, had sensed the betrayal long before Daniel could admit it, and Daniel acknowledged that he should have listened to her. They rebuilt their financial life together, more carefully this time, with complete transparency. Linda insisted on being involved in the business finances, and Daniel was grateful for it rather than resentful. Marcus proved himself invaluable in the aftermath. He restructured the company's financial systems, implemented checks and balances, and slowly helped rebuild what Nathan had damaged. But he also saw how the betrayal had changed his father. Daniel was more cautious now, less trusting, carrying a sadness that hadn't been there before. Marcus understood that Nathan hadn't just stolen money, he'd stolen Daniel's ability to believe in people completely. Nathan was released after serving 2.5 years of his 3-year sentence. He moved to another state, supposedly to start over. Daniel heard through family connections that Nathan had a new job, a new girlfriend, a new life where nobody knew what he'd done. It felt obscene that Nathan could simply move on while Daniel was still living with the consequences of the theft. The hardest part wasn't the money, though the financial damage was severe. The hardest part was learning to trust again after such comprehensive betrayal. Daniel found himself suspicious of everyone, questioning motives, looking for hidden agendas. He had to actively fight against the impulse to assume the worst about people because one person he'd trusted completely had betrayed him systematically for years. Years after Nathan's imprisonment, Daniel ran into him at their mother's funeral. Their mother had died without the brothers reconciling, had spent her final years confused and sad about the family's fracture. Nathan approached Daniel after the service, tried to offer condolences. Daniel looked at his brother, older now, grayer but still with that familiar face that had once meant safety and family, and felt absolutely nothing. Nathan tried to apologize, said he'd been wrong, that he'd hurt people he loved. The apology was probably genuine in its way, but it was also years too late and utterly insufficient for the damage done. Daniel didn't accept the apology or reject it. He simply acknowledged Nathan had spoken and walked away. There was nothing to say to someone who'd spent 15 years stealing from him while playing the role of beloved brother. What Daniel understood eventually was that betrayal like Nathan's wasn't a single act, but an ongoing choice, made every day for years. Every morning, Nathan woke up and decided to maintain the lie. Every family dinner where he smiled and joked while knowing what he was taking. Every birthday, every holiday, every moment of apparent brotherly love had been performed while the theft continued underneath. The business ultimately survived and even thrived. Daniel retired eventually, passing it on to Marcus, who ran it honestly and well. The financial damage Nathan caused was eventually repaired, though it took years longer than it should have. But Daniel never fully recovered the part of himself that had trusted easily, that had believed family was safe, that had thought love protected against betrayal. I want to thank you for staying with this difficult story, for understanding how betrayal can hide beneath the surface of the most trusted relationships, for recognizing that some of the deepest wounds come from people we never thought to protect ourselves against. If this chronicle has resonated with you, if you've experienced betrayal that came from someone you trusted completely, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel and become a member of our community. We're here documenting these real stories about how people hurt each other even within families, how trust can be weaponized, how we survive and rebuild after betrayal that seemed impossible. Your support allows us to continue sharing these hard truths, these stories that need to be told even when they're painful. Subscribe and join us in exploring the complex terrain of family loyalty, betrayal, and the long road toward healing when the person who hurt you was someone you loved without question.